We had some fun playing with the revolution tool in the last few videos, but let's go back to our extrusion tool and let's try to create a sword. So let's start a new document and let's start a new sketch. And I want to start with the blade of a sword. So I want to go with the top view. And if you think about what the blade of a sword looks like from the top view, it kind of looks like a diamond shape. And so let's grab our line tool and let's sketch out a diamond kind of shape. And it doesn't matter if it's perfect, just make sure you connect it exactly on that last point at the end. Right click OK. And so if you look at my diamond, it's not perfect at all. But once we have the general outline drawn out, we're going to go ahead and make it perfect. And to do that, I'm going to introduce you to a new tool. It is called the construction line. So go ahead and click over here. Make sure you have your line tool still selected. And what I want you to do is I want you to connect from the left corner of my diamond to the right corner of my diamond with a construction line. And you'll notice this construction line is not a solid line, it is a dotted line. And that's how you tell the difference between a construction line and what we call an object line or a normal line. And construction lines are actually really cool. What they do is they allow you to manipulate your 2D geometry without affecting your 3D features after you finish your sketch. And so let's draw one more construction line connecting the top corner of our diamond to the bottom corner. And then I'm going to right click and hit OK. And the next thing I want to do is make sure that my lines are horizontal and vertical. And so I'm going to go to my horizontal and vertical constraints, and I'm going to click on my almost horizontal line and turn it horizontal. And you'll notice an error pops up. And this error pops up because it turns out that line was already perfectly horizontal. And so what it will do is either turn it horizontal or it'll tell you that it's already horizontal. And so let's do the same thing with our almost vertical line. Let's turn it vertical. And so that one actually switched to a vertical line. And so again, if it was already vertical, it would just tell you it's already vertical, or it'll turn it vertical for you. And so right click OK. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to make these four outside lines of my diamond equal. And so I'm going to find my equal constraint. And I'm going to tell these two left sides to be equal. And I'm going to tell these two bottom sides to be equal. And finally, I'm going to tell these right sides to be equal. And again, you'll notice another error pops up. And all this is saying is when I made these three sides equal, it constrained this last side to have to be equal as well. It's impossible for these three sides to be equal without this fourth side being equal, so it's over constraining my sketch. The constraints I need are already there. And so right click and hit cancel. And next, I want to put down a point at the intersection of these two construction lines. And so I'm going to hover over here at Create and go down to Point. And I'm going to place a point right here at the intersection of these two construction lines. And I'm going to tell that point to be coincident with the origin. Right click OK. And then the last thing I want to do is give this diamond its size dimensions. And so I'm going to go up here to my dimensioning tool. I'm going to tell it from left to right to have a width of 2 inches. And I'm going to tell it from bottom to top to have a height of 0.75 inches. Right click cancel. And now I have a fully constrained diamond. And so I'm going to go to Finish Sketch, go to my Home View, and next we'll hit Extrude. And I'll think about the length of the blade of a sword, and I'm going to tell this to be 30 inches. And I'm going to zoom out to look at what we got here. And if you look, it kind of looks like the blade of a sword. But to make it look even more like the blade of a sword, I'm going to show you a new aspect of extruding called a taper. So click on this circle and you can drag it to the left or you can drag it to the right and you can see what happens. It angles your extrusion outward or angles it inward depending on which way you go. And so if I want to switch back to length, I can click on this arrow or I can click here. I can also change the taper angle. Here's distance right here. I can change my taper angle right below it. I'm going to give it a taper angle of just 1 degree because I just wanted it to taper out a little bit. And if I look at it, it looks like it tapers out a little bit too far. Maybe if I make it half a degree. So I'm going to go to 0.5 and see how that looks. And that actually looks really good for the blade of a sword. And so I'm going to hit OK. But I also want a point at the end. I want it to come out. I want it to taper out. But then I want it to taper back in to make that sharp point at the end of a sword. And so actually what's really cool in Fusion is I don't have to start a new sketch. I can just extrude off of a shape that's already there. So I'm going to just hit the extrude button and select this face, and it'll extrude this shape out that's already there. And so I'm going to select 5 inches for this, and I'm going to add a taper angle of, and I don't want it to go out, I want it to go in. So I'm going to say -5 degrees inward. And if we look, that looks right, but it doesn't have that point. And so maybe let's see what happens if we double it. Let's say -10 degrees. And that actually looks really good. It looks almost exactly like the blade of a sword. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And then all we need to do is add the guard and the handle to the sword. And so let's go to the bottom of this and let's start a new sketch on the bottom of this blade. And I'm going to find my rectangle tool. And you'll notice that when I try to add a rectangle somewhere in the middle, it wants to magnetize to the shape. I'm actually going to draw my rectangle over here to the top left, just so I can see what I'm working with without these other shapes getting in my way. And after I add its dimensions, I'll center it back to the center of this blade. But let's go ahead and add some dimensions to this thing. I'm going to tell this handle, or I'm sorry, this is the guard. I'm going to tell this guard to be 5 inches wide, and I'm going to tell it to be, let's tell it to be 1 inch tall. I'm going to right click and hit cancel. I'm going to grab my line tool and select my construction lines again. And I'm going to find the center of this edge. And once it pops up with that little triangle, I know I have the center. I'm going to click and drag all the way across and find the other center. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing up here. I'm going to find the center of the top and bring it down to the center of the bottom. And so you should be able to see the difference between my construction lines and my object lines of my rectangle. If your rectangle is made out of construction lines and not object lines, you will not be able to extrude it. So let me show you what I mean real quick before we go any further. I'm going to draw a rectangle with construction lines on. And so now I have this construction line rectangle. I'm going to finish my sketch. And when I try to extrude this, I can extrude this shape pretty easy, but I cannot extrude this construction line. That's the point of construction lines. They're just there to help you draw your sketch, but they can't be used in the 3D world. And so let me go back into my sketch. Let me find my last sketch here and edit it. And we'll move back to the center. I'm going to delete this construction line rectangle. And then I'm going to finish this sketch. I'm going to find a point tool underneath Create. I'm going to put a point right here in the center of these two construction lines. And I'm going to tell that point to be coincident with the origin. And so now I should have a fully constrained rectangle. I'm going to finish my sketch. And I'm going to extrude that rectangle downwards 1 inch. And if you notice, it automatically cut out that diamond. That's an easy fix. I'm just going to select that diamond. If you didn't do it, if you hit extrude and you bring it down 1 inch and you hit enter before you recognize the diamond, that's no big deal. To fix that, we can just go down here and find our third extrusion. If you look, we have our first sketch, that original diamond, our 2 extrusions that we based off of that sketch, and then we can find our second sketch, that rectangle we just used, and then the extrusion based on that rectangle, the extrusion 3. I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to go to edit feature. And I just want to add this diamond, so I'm going to select that as well and hit OK. And now you can see we have the guard of our sword. We just need to add the handle. And so I'm going to start a new sketch on this bottom face. And to sketch my handle, I'm going to use a new type of shape. I'm going to go over here to Create, find Slot, and I want to go to Center Slot. And again, I'm going to draw it off to the side and center it later. And so I'm going to click, drag to the right so it's horizontal, click again, and then drag up and click one more time to create my slot. And then right click OK. And I'm going to tell this slot to have a width from center to center of 0.75 inches. And I'm going to tell it to be from bottom to top 0.5 inches. Right click cancel. I'm going to go to Create, find my point, and put a point down right in the center of this slot. When you see that triangle, you know you're good. I'm going to go to my coincident constraint, and I'm going to tell this center point to be the same as my origin. And I have a fully constrained slot. I'm going to finish my sketch, look at it from another angle so I can see what's going on, and I'm going to hit extrude, find that shape, and I want to tell it to be 8 inches long. Hit OK, hit the home button on my view cube, And there's my sword. The last thing we need to do is hit save, and let's just call it sword. Hit the save button, and we are finished with this shape.